so I'm wondering, did you write that? Why did you write that? Strange that you went into venture capital then, but go on. I don't think that many people who look into this agree with you, but the unemployment rate is 4.1%. Most people who Republican-run city and Republican-run state, your state.
All right, YouTube, I'm sorry it's been, I don't know if that picked. Well, I apologize it's been so long since my last video. As some of you may know, World is headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina. Hurricane Helene just swept right through Asheville, so our studio there is no longer. We got a pretty cool setup here at Evangelism Explosion in Asheville. The one thing that hasn't changed probably since the last time I talked to you all is how tired you must be of election coverage. So guess what we're going to do today? We're going to talk about the election. Most media outlets really turn up the dial on bad journalism, and it's in full bloom. I mean, we're in fall here in North Carolina, so not much is in bloom, but bad journalism is in full bloom. Front and center, a great example of this, point in case, a New York Times interview with JD Vance. Now, unlike his opponents, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, Vance hasn't been, super selective of who he gives interviews to, neither has former President Trump, anywhere from Fox to ABC, as you can see here.
Element of truth here, and of course President Trump was actually in Aurora, Colorado talking to people on the ground, and what we're hearing, of course, Martha, is that people are terrified by what has happened with some of these Venezuelan gangs.
Senator Vance, I'm going to stop you because I know exactly what happened.
Martha.
I'm going to stop you. The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes.
To the New York Times, the left of all left media sources that has abandoned any kind of journalistic integrity. But I can't blame him for going on. If anyone's suited to take on these attacks, it's him. He's calm, he's cool, collected, he has numbers, facts, data straight. And you'll see that here in this interview that he doesn't get shook by very much. Shooken, shaked, shacked. That's not it. But I do think it's worth... Okay, can't do that. JD Vance is actually helpful for dissecting what the media is doing. Now, everyone says media trust is low. You ask anyone on the streets, you take a poll, it's really clear, the numbers are clear. But why? Why don't we trust them? What are they doing wrong? This New York Times interview was a masterclass in media ploys. So let's dive into it. Hopefully it gives you tools to see that there's a big difference between journalism that's getting you the most reliable information and journalism that's trying to sell you something. Sell you to get to buy into the establishment, to buy into a certain political agenda.
One of the things that many people said to me in advance of this interview is which JD Vance is going to show up. Could you explain that contrast?
Wasn't that how most people are, right? Sometimes they're frustrated with what's going on in the country. Sometimes they are a little bit more optimistic. Sometimes it's both, right? You're maybe optimistic about the country, about its people, about its resources.
You weren't frustrated at the debate?
Well, sometimes I got frustrated, right? I criticized Kamala Harris's immigration policies. If you watched, a 45-minute JD Vance rally, you would not have been surprised by the debate performance. I think what happens is that if you take a clip out of context from 4 years and that's the only way you've ever been introduced to me, then sure, the debate performance might have been surprising, but I don't think most people were surprised by it.
I think, though, so many people have that thought about you that they don't know which version of you they're going to get, and that are different than the ones you hold today. I mean, you said...
Like, what do you mean?
I hate the police. And so I'm wondering, Did you write that? Why did you write that?
Okay, so if you watch this channel for long enough, you know that I always applaud persistence, that they won't give up on a point. So Lulu Garcia Navarro asked a question, and then she answered it because she realized it's the biggest waste of time on a question ever. Did you write that? Yes or no? Okay, doesn't really get us anywhere. It's clear that he wrote it, and then why did you write it? Like, that kind of reminds me of the Michael Scott video.
Sometimes I'll start a sentence, and I don't even know where it's going. I just hope I find it along the way. Like an improv conversation. Improvisation.
Okay, so it starts out as pretty friendly. She frames the questions in a pretty friendly way, and then it starts to get adversarial, which, once again, I don't have any problem with the journalists getting adversarial. We'll talk about that later, where there's good examples of journalists who really press and lean into it. You're not trying to be buddy-buddy and friends with your subject, especially when they're a politician. You're trying to get to the heart of issues. But the thing is, she's not trying to get to the heart of policy issues. She's trying to push a message that she's been told to push, and if Vance won't say it, she'll say it. Watch.
You talked about the Haitian immigrant community, which we should say they are legally here and allowed to work. And you spread a rumor or helped spread a rumor that they were eating pets, which turned out to be completely false.
I talk about being a good husband, being a good father. You know, the way I've often put it is the American dream to me was never making a lot of money, buying a big house, driving a fast car. It was having what me and Usha have right now, right? Like,
It's strange that you went into venture capital then, but go on.
Okay, that reaction grinded my gears more than anything else. Like, it honestly sounds like a divorced couple meeting with their lawyer. Like, really petty comments that are so unnecessary in an interview. Like, there's limited time for you to talk about what you need to talk about, and you have to spend time saying, oh yeah, well, that's interesting because you became a venture capitalist. I mean, since when is it a journalist's job to insert those little snide remarks? Like, unless she's trying to give you a caricature of Vance, which I think she is. It only gets worse. Watch this.
5 million people illegally in the country. I think when I wrote that piece, we were probably
We don't
hopefully
know
at
the
6
number.
we were at 6 or 7 million. Yeah, I mean, look, it's an estimate, right?
Here's another fact check. We've seen plenty of that during the debates, and no one did that until the past few years. Is that because no one ever told lies in the 250 years this country has been around? No, it's not a journalist's job to do that. They think you're dumb. Like, I honestly, I watched this interview, and I watched many of the interviews, like the Martha Raddatz interview I showed you at the beginning of this, and I think they think the American public is dumb.
You'll have to excuse my friend. He's a little slow.
That they don't know how to do their own research, how to see past a lie, how to challenge something. They think that you're dumb. And it's really demeaning, honestly. That's not what good journalism does.
Now, a community of 60,000 people, there are 1,000 children in Springfield schools who do not speak English. For years, I have heard from the American citizens of Springfield, Ohio, that their lives have gotten worse. Have we talked about the fact that many of them have been evicted from their homes, and then Haitian migrants are moved in, 4 families to a home, massively violating zoning laws? They get
They're
subsidy.
not moved in.
They get subsidies.
They have been attracted
They
there
get-
because they're working.
They've been attracted there to violate zoning laws, Lulu. They're subsidized by the local authorities, by the federal authorities, by your tax dollars. So now 4 families are living in a
It's a
home.
Republican-run city
4
and a Republican-run state. Your state.
4
Well, it's Republicans' fault. Okay, so is it a bad thing or not? Because the way you framed it before with the immigrants being in Ohio was that Republicans are making a big deal over nothing, not being inclusive of these immigrants. And now she's saying, well, you guys are at fault for this. It's your state. Figure it out. And so it's so two-sided. Once again, it sounds like a petty argument between a couple, not a journalist. All right, Caleb, you're making such a fuss, taking up all my YouTube time here on whatever day this is. What's the big deal? It's because the media is supposed to be critical, right? Well, what do you mean? They're being critical. Look at her right there. She's being very critical. Well, they're unequally critical to one side and not critical towards another. Regardless of if both candidates were equally yoked, were both very sharp, very experienced, had a good track record. All of the media conglomerate is giving softball questions, pandering, drooling over this candidate. I mean, look at this. Howard Stern.
You feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like, when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you.
I want it to go well for you. Since when has anyone said that to a politician for an interview? I want this interview to go well for you.
A lot of good stories.
Did you get that energy from your parents, or the thought of, hey, I have to fight for what's right, and I got to get out there? And I mean, when
Jimmy Fallon, do you get that energy from your parents? I mean, they really have caricatured Kamala Harris, but in the most glorious possible way. Gosh, I can't talk. It's been too long. The most glorious way possible. She doesn't have to do any campaigning. She doesn't have to speak. The media is doing all of that for her, and that's not the job of the media. I mean, if all of these people worked for her ad campaigns, I would understand. I'd be like, yeah, you're doing your job. You're making her seem like a likable person. The media is not that. You have to understand that journalists are journalists, not propagandists. Now, I'm recording this on Thursday, October 17th, meaning that last night Kamala Harris went on Fox and was interviewed by Bret Baier. And so many would come back at me and say, Caleb, she's not only doing softball interviews, she did go to an adversarial news group. And that's true. And I think it was very intentional on the part of her campaign to show that she's strong enough, brave enough to put up with that, which I don't know why you have to go out of your way to do that. I think you should just do that in general. It's not like a big old brave thing to do. Like the Washington Post said, it's risky for her to go on Fox, and I don't know why you're saying that. That's just goofy. And in the meantime, she didn't even answer a single thing about her policy. Watch this.
If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
Okay, so props to Brett Baer here. He wouldn't take a vague answer, and he asked her to explain. He wouldn't put the words in her mouth, and she couldn't explain, and so it kind of uncovered something about her that most Americans probably know already, but he didn't have to spoon feed it and assume that Americans are dumb. He gave her a chance to speak for herself, and that's not what the New York Times and the Post are doing. That's not what NPR is doing. That's not what MSNBC is doing. That's not what ABC is doing. They won't let them speak for themselves and let it just hang in the air for people to take it and dissect it as they want. They feel the need to everyone to be a commentator, whether you're a reporter or not. Everyone has to be a commentator. Even if you're the one asking the questions. Like in these sit-down interviews, your job is to sit there, ask a question, and let people watch the response, not to interpret it for them. And yet all these interviewers feel the need to be the interpreter for the rest of us. And it's just demeaning. It's demeaning to the mass public. Why aren't the full interviews being posted? Why can't you see these people how they are organically in a raw sense? Because as president in these situations, you're going to be reacting things in a raw, organic way. And you can't chop up and edit a drone strike, for example. You can't chop up and edit hundreds of thousands of millions of immigrants coming into the country. Once it happens, and you have to deal with it. None of us sit down and have dinner with Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, JD Vance or Tim Walz. This is what we get in terms of who they are, not just what they're writing on their websites and can doctor up, but who they are organically and in a real sense. And as we've already talked about, we're not getting that in the debates. It's why I think certain podcasters like Joe Rogan, maybe Megyn Kelly, why sometimes you get better questions out of that, because no one's telling them what to do. It's them organically wanting to know for themselves because they're independent journalists, as it were, so to speak. To sum it all up with something that JD Vance pointed out in that New York Times interview, that you get a caricature of him based off of a 30-second clip someone pulled from an interview. And lots of people did that from this interview. They've done it from previous interviews. And they didn't get the full context of the 2-hour interview. And he said, watch the 2-hour interview. It's live. It's me being raw, mistakes, blunders, whatever. Watch the full thing because you'll get the context. For much of the mass media, they are playing to that 30-second hot take culture that's out there and using it to manipulate how voters think. And it's not the way journalism is supposed to be. Hey, I'm Caleb Bailey. I'm a reporter with World Watch News, and we are a daily educational news program for students. Our team tackles current events and human interest stories all in one, while hopefully not leaving you stressed out. Along with these videos on YouTube, we have a full 10-minute show. And if you go to worldwatch.news/YouTube24 and use the code YouTube24, that's all caps YouTube24, you'll get the first month for free. So if you like what we're doing here, try out our full news program. 10 minutes, 5 days a week. Just use the link in the code and we'll see you over there. Thanks for watching.